Aloha. You're watching Cradlepoint, part of Ericsson Enterprise Wireless Solutions Weekly Threat Intelligence Hotshots. I'm Peter. Please forgive, pardon the logo this week. I just flew in from Boise, Idaho. We had our 2024 sales kickoff this past week, but I know you're not interested in the clothing. You're interested in the content. And as always, every week we have our senior threat intelligence analyst, Alex Ryan, with us. How's it going on this Friday, Alex?
Yeah, going great. Thanks, Peter.
Nice. All right. So let's get right into it. Might as well. Hey,
you betcha.
For our weekly hot shots. So the big news today.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Okay. So the reason that I wanted to cover this story that just came out today is the first time I read an article, I think that I just freaked out and I was like, oh my God, somebody has all of my text messages from forever. So that is not the case. Rather, it's metadata about telephone calls and text messages that has been lost. But let's just back that up. I just wanted everybody to be like, oh, phew, okay. Text message content is not out there, but rather this breach from AT&T for about 110 million people, and which is pretty much their entire customer base, as well as any other cell carrier that they were using AT&T as their backbone.
Oh,
the cell phone and the phone call, including landlines, all of that information was recorded and held in a database. And it was only for a specific period of time, which is on the table, right? And there was no time or date or anything like that for this data. Rather, it's just showing the connections between these different telephone numbers. Interestingly, this database was kept on Snowflake, and it was only a username and password. And the credentials came from an info stealer and were bought on the dark web and used for this attack. So we see like the full life cycle here from info stealers, right? Which we've talked about several times in our previous hot shots. So Seeing that full life cycle here again. So the breach actually happened on April 19th, but the FBI asked that the reporting be delayed. And I think that the reason is that if you think about what would someone do with this data, right? You don't have the contents, you don't have the date and time, but what it does tell you is people who are connected to each other.
Yeah.
And it's not difficult now to get names and telephone numbers associated using data that's on the internet, right? So we can certainly do that at scale now. So if you're in espionage, if you're in any kind of political business, like maybe a news journalist who has a contact, things like that, and we have our state-sponsored actors who are looking to track and identify information leaks, things like that, that would put these folks very much in danger, which is why the FBI requested that it be delayed.
Yeah, maybe give them time to change the number. And then for those who don't know, Snowflake is actually a third-party cloud storage provider, right, Alex?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So what, did you get like a little bit of a cold sweat there for about 5-10 minutes when you noticed like, holy cow, my number's been upheaved?
No comment.
Okay.
Anyway, so that was just it. We're seeing more fallout from the Snowflake, which, as you mentioned, is a third-party provider who did not have the vulnerability. Rather, their clients had stored their data with weak authentication, username and passwords. So now Snowflake requires all of their users to use multi-factor authentication. Yay. So just wanted to get this out so that we understood what the data was, what it was for, how it could be used maliciously. So we should expect a trend of smishing, which is phishing links and files being sent via SMS. We should expect that we would see those kinds of attacks trending up now that there's such a large amount of information about telephone numbers, both on AT&T and others.
Yeah, and just I don't, maybe I mentioned it, but it just allows, to connect the dots. I for some reason in my head now, I'm thinking of those, the detectives on the cork board, and they got like the mob boss on top and then the strings connecting to all the other entities involved in the operation. That's certainly something that they could do with this, obviously with a digital program or even AI, for crying out loud.
That's right. You're not legit unless you have the red string. It's the key.
For sure. On a push pin.
On a push pin. That's right. Sweet. All right. So the next story that we have coming up is about Radius Blast, or BlastRADIUS, actually. So Radius, okay, let me back up. I have not frequently seen so many articles by large information security groups about a vulnerability when there is no known exploit for this vulnerability at this time.
Oh.
However, if you look up BlastRADIUS, you are going to find a huge number of articles and explanation and remediation steps for this vulnerability. And the reason being is that Radius is a authentication protocol that has been used for network devices since the beginning of time.
Forever.
Right? Which is about 1997. But it's a legacy protocol, and this would definitely fall into one of those, if it's not broken, don't fix it, type of technologies that we have in our infrastructure. So big routers like BGP routers and things like that, that you just don't want to touch it, right?
Yeah.
You might leave legacy technologies in place just because you don't want to break it. However, this vulnerability is so intense. It's so critical. So on CVSS, it's a 9. And there are some barriers to entry for the threat actor. They have to be on the network, that the authentication between the network device and the Radius server, that authentication has to go across a network that the threat actor can access. So the threat actor is going to use a man-in-the-middle attack. And so, Peter, if you could just bring up that diagram for us.
One moment. Now, if I remember correctly from back in the day, correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember that Radius stood for remote access dial-in user service. Is that correct?
That is very close. It was on dial-up. Absolutely. Yeah. Well done.
Thank you. Some things stick over time.
I know, right? So what we're seeing here is that the threat actor captures the request between the network device and the server, and they modify the authentication request. What is the point? The point is that the threat actor themselves can make a request for authentication, modify that authentication to say, yes, it's valid, and send it on to the network device who says, yes, sure, come on in. So because it does have some barriers to entry, you're like, okay, they have to be on the same network. But given how many breaches of networks that we've seen, we can no longer say our network is or our security is at the perimeter, right?
Yeah.
The security now has to be at the edge. It has to be closer to the device. You've got to be able to have visibility and controls inside your internal network. Now, in this case, if you use network segmentation and zero trust architecture principles to build your networks, right, this couldn't happen because you wouldn't have something like a random computer sitting on the same network that your network devices in your radio service is on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is most likely in an older type of network where they haven't done network segmentation. But it can have a huge impact because imagine, your switches go down, your routers go down, your big BGP routers go down. Huge impact, immediate, and it can be very difficult to recover. So I think that that's why we're seeing such a large advertising about this vulnerability, even though we haven't seen exploit code yet. And there's a big yet. because the amount of time that it takes threat actors to create an exploit after a vulnerability is created is a couple of hours to maybe 2 days. So very short time frame before we start seeing exploits.
Yeah, and it's very, obviously good to let people at least be aware why we do this show every week. Hey, you might not be impacted by it today, but it's certainly that could be something that's coming in the next few weeks.
Yeah. Radius actually goes over UDP, which is in clear text. So it might not even be encrypted. And then also sometimes it goes across the internet. So you've got authentication unencrypted across the interwebules. It's not good. Even if you're going across sort of an unmanaged network, a network that's not your own, right? You're just transiting through. You could also, that's also an area of weakness that could be leveraged by a threat actor to do this man-in-the-middle attack.
Wow.
Yep, there's our sources. But
always our sources.
Yes, always our sources. If you have any questions about this, certainly let us know. I think that the breach of the AT&T data, I'm very interested to see how that data might be used by our threat actors if my predictions are accurate. But definitely warn our users about smishing. I really think that that's going to come on pretty strong here. Malicious links, files to download, telephone numbers to call, those kinds of things are going to be increasing.
Yeah, and they may even use this breach, right, where they you've been impacted by this AT&T breach. Click the link to make sure
right?
You know what I mean? Like they can use this as the oomph to get them to click the link.
Yes, indeed. Very creative, right? We cannot fault threat actors for lack of creativity.
Good thing I'm not one.
Yes.
So that's very right. So definitely something I think, with this may be something we'll have to talk about again in the coming weeks, depending how all this, kind of sifts through the system. But yeah, certainly something to keep your eye on, folks.
Right. I mean, we see Snowflake, right? We see the impact of the Snowflake incident continuing on and on and on. And with AT&T data breach here, we may see the same thing.
Yeah, I think this is like the second or third episode we've identified one of those cloud storage breaches. Holy cow, Alex. Always coming with the goods every week. Certainly going to be turbulent for some of these organizations we talked about. And I told you before, we had some turbulence coming into Burbank today. But I always appreciate your time, Alex. And we obviously appreciate you for joining us every week. If you like content like this, you know what to do. Sub, like, share. For my good pal, Alex, always nice seeing you. I'm Peter, and we're with Cradlepoint, part of the Ericsson Enterprise Wireless Solutions team. Thanks for watching.
Bye, everyone.